Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Gopijana Vallabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Raja Janaranjana Jaya Raja Janaranjana Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamunadiravarachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Gopijana Vallabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Yasodanandana Radha Radha-dana-ranjana, Jaya Radha-dana-ranjana. Yasodanandana, Radha-dana-ranjana, Jaya Radha-dana-ranjana. Yasodanandana, Radha-dana-ranjana, Jaya Radha-dana-ranjana. Yamunatiravarachari, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Yamunatiravarachari, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava, Jaya Kunja Vihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramhansa Brahmadakacharya Asadhara Sidhu Shri Shriman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Raj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Premanande Haribol Slava Zarani Bhaktam Slava Shri Guru Shri Gurangi Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthapate Shri Mate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shinivadi Paskatya Desatarne Om Agana Timidandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksur Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavam Scha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Prajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakans Vitam Scha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishubhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hri Priye Vanchakapa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare hare-rama, hare-rama, rama-rama, hare-hare. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 1, the Advent of Lord Krishna, Introduction. Text number 3. Avitiryaya durvamse Bhagavan Bhuta Bhavanaha Kritavan Yani Vishvatma Tanini Vada Vishtarat Avitiryaya durvamse Bhagavan Bhuta Bhavanaha Kritavan Yani Vishvatma Tanina Vada Vishtarat. Bhavanaha Vishvatma Avitirya Durvishramse Bhagavan Bhuta Bhavanaha Kritavan Yani Vishvatma Tanini Vada Vishtarat. Ladies. Bhavana Bhuta Bhavanaha Vishvatma Vishtarat Anivigante Bhavana Bhuta Bhavanaha Kritavanyani Vishvatma Tanina Vada Vishtarat. Avitirya, descending, after descending. Yadu Vishvamse, in the dynasty of Yadu. Keep it in English, anytime. What's that? He has his tablet. Yadu Vamse, in the dynasty of Yadu. Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Bhuta Bhavana, who is the cause of the cosmic manifestation. Kritavan, executed. Yani, whatever activities. Vishva-atma, the super soul of the entire universe. Tani, all those activities. Na, unto us. Vada, kindly say. Vishvarat, elaborately. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Super Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, the cause of the cosmic manifestation, appeared in the dynasty of Yadu. Please tell me elaborately about his glorious activities and character. from the beginning to the end of his life. Please repeat. The Super Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, the cause of the cosmic manifestation, appeared in the dynasty of Yadu. Please tell me elaborately about his glorious activities and character from the beginning to the end of his life. Purport. In this verse, the word Kritavan, Yani, indicate that all the different activities Krishna performed while present on earth are beneficial to human society. If religionists, philosophers, and people in general simply hear the activities of Krishna, they will be liberated. We have described several times that there are two kinds of Krishna Katha, represented by Bhagavad Gita, spoken personally by Krishna himself, and Srimad Bhagavatam, spoken by Shukadeva Goswami about the glories of Krishna. Anyone who becomes even slightly interested in Krishna Katha is liberated. Kirtanad eva Krishnasya mukta sangha param vrajet. The Bhagavatam 12:351. Simply by chanting or repeating Krishna Katha, one is liberated from the contamination of Kali Yuga. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore advised, Yari Deka Tarikaha Krishna Upadesh. This is the mission of Krishna consciousness, to hear about Krishna and thus be liberated from material bondage. So the text again. The Super Soul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, the cause of the cosmic manifestation, appeared in the dynasty of Yadu. Please tell me elaborately about his glorious activities and character from the beginning to the end of his life. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Shrindivadi Paskyadyade Satarane. At the end of the 10th canto, Parikshit Maharaj asked the question about how sound vibration, which appears to be material, can actually bring one to the platform of liberation. Or how by simply hearing Krishna Katha, one can actually come to the spiritual platform. So, in the Padma Purana it is stated, Namas Chintami Krishnas Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purno Shuddho Nitya Mukto Binatvan Nama Nama No. That Namas Chintamani Krishna, that Krishna's name is just like a Chintamani stone. Namas Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha. And it is full of rasa. The name of Krishna also is a form, and it's full of transcendental rasa. Purno Nitya Mukta, and it's complete in itself. It's not different from Krishna. And is eternally liberated. Binatvam Nama Namino, and is not different from Krishna. So in other words, there are two types of sound vibration which is mundane, and sound vibration which is spiritual. So spiritual sound vibration means that it has some relation with the Krishna. Just like if you have sunlight, you also have to have the sun. Without the sun, you can't have sunlight. And if you have sun, you should have also sunlight. So if we try to divorce our energy, the material energy means that which is divorced from Krishna, seemingly, or covered from our consciousness from Krishna. There's nothing that Krishna is not intimately involved in, either directly as Bhagavan or indirectly as Paramatma or Bhagavan. But in our consciousness, when we think that there is a separation, that's what we call material. And when we see it in relation to Krishna, that's what we call spiritual. Of course, to see things in relation to Krishna is not only an intellectual exercise. because intellectually one can try to separate the soul from matter, for instance, and to a certain extent, intellectually we might be able to do it, up to the point of even realizing that we're not this body. If we follow the philosophy, for instance, just hearing Bhagavad Gita that we're not this body is insufficient for liberation. One actually has to act in the position of a soul in order to achieve realization of the soul. To some extent, due to Krishna's mercy, if we hear that the body's changing, but the soul's not changing, then we get some insight into the fact that we're eternal. But that's not sufficient to realize fully that we're eternal. We also have to act as the spirit soul. Therefore, Krishna goes over the process of liberation in the 3rd chapter, after reviewing the 2nd chapter, which is a summary. And in the 3rd chapter, Krishna begins with what we can do to realize that we're a soul. Krishna doesn't bring in so much, he brings in the Supreme Soul in this 3rd chapter, but mostly he's talking about karma yoga, what we can do in relationship to the Supreme Soul so that we can get a little bit more deeper insight of the fact that who we are and who the Supreme Soul is. Namely, to do things that are of a matter of duty. But duty, as Krishna says in the 3rd chapter, doesn't come out of one's own imagination. Anad bhavati bhutani parjana anasambhava jagna bhavati parjano jagna karma samudbhava. That all living entities, they subsist on food grains, which are produced from rain, and rain comes with the performance of sacrifice, and sacrifice is born of one's prescribed duty. So, in other words, there's a process of even getting our maintenance in this world. Namely, we need rain, because without rain we can't get food grains. And without food grains we can't survive. But food grains and the rain don't come automatically or whimsically, they come by the performance of yajna, or a sacrifice. And the yajna is born it comes from the Vedas. Karma bravo bhavan vidi, pramakshara samudbhavan, tasmad brahma te brahma, nityam jagne pratishthitam. And the Vedas come from the Supreme Lord. They're spoken by the Supreme Lord. They're His instructions. They didn't come out of nothing. Now, if one is performing karma yoga, for instance, when we do our activities because this is our duty, we may not remember Krishna. We may not see it in relation with Krishna, but there's some vague conception that Krishna is involved because we know, or we should know, that these duties come from Krishna. Now, who Krishna is, what he looks like, what he really wants, that we may not be familiar with, because Krishna says, bhakti mam abhijananti, he just wants love, bhakti, devotion. That's the only thing that actually satisfies him. But Krishna is so kind that even if we follow his instructions, he takes that to some degree as devotion. So there's an element of bhakti even in karma yoga, therefore it's called karma yoga. It means to do our duty with some understanding that this is coming from Krishna, whoever he might be, whatever he might look like, Vishnu, Krishna, whatever. But at least we know that there's an authority giving us this instruction and we're following it. Therefore there's an element of knowledge and detachment. Detachment from thinking this is I and mine. And therefore by karma yoga there's a degree of purification. And at the end of the 3rd chapter, Krishna mentions that evam buddhe param bhutva samstam yatmana atmana jehi shatru mahabaho kamarupam darashadam. Thus, knowing oneself to be transcendental to material senses, mind, and intelligence, one should control the lower self by the higher, and thus by spiritual strength conquer this insatiable enemy known as lust. So karma yoga doesn't really deal directly with love of God, but it deals with conquering lust to come out of the material bondage by use of intelligence. which is supplied, of course, by Krishna, either directly as a supersoul in the heart or through the Vedas. So by following the Vedic literature, by following the Vedic literature's representatives, Guru, Sadhana, and Shastra, one can conquer lust and all its other corollaries, because lust is simply fundamental. We don't talk against lust, and then we glorify anger, greed, illusion, etc. We're not picking on lust, because lust, as Krishna says, further degrades itself into anger, which further degrades itself into greed, and then anger, and then illusion. And as the more we come under illusion, the more we forget who we actually are. The more it becomes very difficult to understand that we're souls, that we're spiritual living entities, and that there's a Supreme Soul. And then we lose our intelligence. We're not guided by the Supreme Soul. We don't care less. We're guided by more or less illusion, which is the cloud of greed and anger and lust guides us. And we fall deeper and deeper into the modes of ignorance, if we're not already in ignorance or passion. Therefore, Karma Yoga teaches we have to use our intelligence and overcome the pushing of lust, and that intelligence ultimately means to rely upon the Super Soul, and because Krishna is involved, there's some amount of purification. There's some faith in the words of Krishna and the instructions that if we follow them, we'll become purified to some extent of the things that really disturb us, namely being forced by the material energy to do things which are actually not very good. Just like, for instance, even a devotee, when it's time for the feast, we think, well, last week I ate too much and I got sick, and this week I'm not going to do it. And we know our enemy is lust. We just don't, it's not the intelligent thing to do. We don't think, yes, last week I overate prasadam, I got sick, and this week I'm going to very intelligently overeat prasadam. Maybe some intelligence can be there. Maybe we'll chew our food a little bit more. But there's a limit to how many little pieces of food can fit into our stomach before they come out our ears. Like Kumbhakarna, when he was fighting against the monkey soldiers, he was eating so many of them that some of them actually, not only he was filled up his stomach, but some of them actually escaped through his ears. So that's not the idea. The idea is if we use our intelligence, then we can conquer over lust, and therefore we feel a sense of relief. I'm not sick this week. What happened? I actually use my intelligence, ultimately coming from Krishna, because Krishna's instructions don't have to be so profound that no one can understand them. For instance, in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Nashti yukta yuktahara viharasya yukta cheta sukarmasu yukta cheta vodasya karma bhavati dukkha. One who's regulated in his habits of eating, sleeping, work, and recreation can mitigate all the material pains by practice of the yoga system. So Krishna is not against the yoga system. He's not against karma yoga because he's speaking it. But it's applicable for those who don't accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when they follow his instructions, then they become freed from their distress. Therefore it says, tu shanti. By hearing from the devotees, we become satisfied. Tu shanti means satisfied. That actually we're less in distress, we're more peaceful, we're more happy, we're more clear in our thoughts. On the other hand, it's not ramanti, it's not pure bliss, but it's satisfaction by making progress, becoming liberated from our distresses. And then Krishna further goes, so anyone who follows that, Krishna's karma yoga, they develop some faith in the Vedic literature. That it's not just ordinary instructions, it's actually liberating instructions. And then in the 4th chapter, Krishna talks about Guru, and how the Guru gives us instructions. And that the Guru is giving instructions coming from Krishna. They're not just ordinary instructions coming out of his mouth, out of nowhere, that he invented, because he has nothing else to do, or he wants to say what's popular or what's interesting. He repeats Krishna's message. And that message, ultimately, when one comes to the platform of Jnana Yoga, which is what the 4th chapter deals with, then that message is that you're not only supposed to deal with the physical energy, you're also supposed to deal with the people, the living entities around you. That all living entities are a part of Krishna, and that they're within him, and that they belong to him. So there's an element of personalism introduced in the 4th chapter in Jnana Yoga. At least, not necessarily personalism, but at least the idea that all living entities are also spiritual beings, and that if the giant came along and stepped on us, we wouldn't appreciate it. We complain, it's not a nice giant, why did it step on me? So similarly, when we see an ant, we shouldn't think, oh, you rascal ant, you're in my way. No one gets in my way. Step aside or else you'll get crushed. Well, the ant also doesn't appreciate it either. It doesn't go home to its mother and say, I met this nice giant and he stepped on me today. So this acknowledgement that all living entities are also spiritual beings will also improve our consciousness towards liberation, because lust, anger, greed, which leads to illusion, manifests itself, or at least attachment and aversion, as Krishna says, in distorted relationships with other living entities. That our problems, as Queen Kunti said, are due to social interactions with others. Because we're lusty or angry or greedy, therefore people who satisfy our lust or greed or even anger, they're our friends, and those who are obstacles to satisfying our lust, anger, or greed, they're our enemies. And therefore, our friends and enemies are not born out of nothing, they're born out of illusion in the material world. Or as Prahlad Maharaj said, there's no enemy in the material world except for the uncontrolled mind. So, in the 5th chapter, Krishna talks about combining both together, knowledge and detachment, and working in Krishna in devotional service, with the idea that at least some knowledge of Krishna, that he's the enjoyer, that he's the controller, that he's the friend. Not a clear knowledge of exactly what Krishna looks like, what he does, or anything like that, but at least some knowledge about what Krishna does in the material world as the super soul. That he's the controller, he's the enjoyer, he's a friend, he's trying to guide us. And then the 6th chapter, trying to meet the super soul through the process of meditation, calming the mind down, and then coming in contact with the super soul. Calming the mind down means to give up the idea that we're the proprietor, that we're the controller, that we're the friend of everyone. We're the friend of some people at least. That we're the ones who are the benefactors, we could say. That due to my mercy, people get benefit. And then in the 7th chapter, Krishna introduces what explains here. The middle 6 chapters of Bhagavad Gita deal with pure devotional service. Maya sakta manakparta yogam yunjan manashaya asamshayam samagramam yata gasasi tatshinu. Now hear from me, O son of Pritha, how by practicing yoga in full consciousness of me, with mind attached to me, you can know me in full, free from doubt. So Maya Sakta, the whole first part of it, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Stanga Yoga, is to purify and pacify and learn how to control the mind by our determined desires to fix the mind on spiritual subject matters. At least working, understanding, meditating, and then fixing the mind completely. They're all different stages of fixing the mind on Krishna. Different aspects of understanding Krishna properly. Samaya Sakta Manak Partha, Yoga Myunjan, and it's all been achieved by Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Stanga Yoga, and now we're going to try to do it with Bhakti also, bhakti-yoga. Asamshayam samagram mam yatagyasiti tatshino. And it's all to realize that actually there's no difference between Krishna and things in relationship to Krishna. It's not that everything is Krishna, but Krishna is the light and the sun and the moon. It's his energy. It's not different from him. Like sunlight is not different from the sun, although it is not the sun, simultaneously one and different. Similarly, all energies are not different from Krishna. They all have the same spiritual nature in different ways because Krishna has a variety of energies, but they're all spiritual. And Krishna is, in the material world, he said he pervades everything by his energies, and also he exists transcendentally as the supersoul, controlling everything through his energies. Therefore, when we hear about Krishna, then Krishna is actually there. It's not that when we hear about Krishna, suddenly he appears there. He's everywhere, and already. He doesn't have to get a plane ride from Goloka Vrindavan. He's already there. What happens is that we get there. We become aware. Because Krishna exists transcendentally, so when we come to the transcendental platform, then he's there. He's already there. The pastimes in Vrindavan are all pervasive. And when we hear about them, then we go to Vrindavan. We arrive. Our consciousness arrives in Vrindavan. It's not that Vrindavan comes here. It's already here. But we're somewhere else. Similarly, when we become aware of how things are related to Krishna, they're already related to Krishna. But we just become conscious of how they're related to Krishna, and that's called Krishna consciousness. So Krishna consciousness is a process of uncovering our consciousness, so we can actually experience things as they are. Not something new, but simply uncovering so that we become conscious again of things as they are already. So when we talk about things the sound vibration is not different from Krishna, well, everything came out of sound vibration in the material world, and everything is product of sound vibration. Krishna is effulgence. So it's not, but Krishna is eternally in the spiritual world. He exists as the holy name exists eternally as Krishna. Krishna and the holy name are not different. We think it's a sound vibration, but it's actually Krishna. But because we're covered, when we chant the holy name or we hear the holy name, we think it's just some ordinary sound, but it's because we have covered consciousness, that's all. But when we become transcendental, when we become uncovered, then when we chant Hare Krishna, we'll realize that Krishna is actually right there. Actually, we go there. We become there. We become aware of what's actually already there. And of course, Krishna is being there because he's everywhere when he in one form, but in the form of the holy name. Then Krishna will reciprocate according to on an advanced level, according to our consciousness, according to our love for him. He'll reciprocate with us. So chanting the holy name has different levels of experience. But some faith has to be there. Otherwise, why should we keep on chanting unless we have some faith that eventually we'll get to a higher level? Otherwise, if it's every day 16 rounds with the same experience every day, then after a while people will just give up. Why should I do it? What meaning does it have? That one has to try to understand and develop faith, and therefore on the basis of that faith, a certain mood, that Krishna can actually help me. Krishna can actually protect me. Krishna can actually elevate me in consciousness to the platform of loving devotion. If I make an effort if I have not only an effort to just chant, but also an effort to understand and appreciate and have enough faith to try it out. Instead of chant Hare Krishna, oh, the energy of the Lord, you can't be there. It's not possible. You're too far away anyhow. Even if you're there, you're too far away. And even if you were right here, but you couldn't be real. How can anyone be a sound vibration? It's not possible. It's illogical. It's unscientific. I don't believe it. It didn't work yesterday. Why should it work today? So that's called Maya. And because we're not Krishna conscious, because we're covered to some extent, therefore Maya has a way of dealing with us, playing with us, and we accept it. Yes, Maya, you're very intelligent. You analyzed everything perfectly. This is actually my experience. I accept it. I have more faith in you than I have in Krishna, than I have in Prabhupada, than I have in the scripture, because that's what I believe in, and no one's going to teach me anything. So if we have more of an open attitude, that actually the problem is me, not with the holy name, not with the philosophy, not with Krishna, not with Prabhupada, not with the devotees, the problem is with me, and I have to try to make some progress and ignore Maya, her philosophy that Krishna couldn't be God, the holy name couldn't be the same as Krishna, etc., etc. And then I'm just wasting my time here trying to chant 16 rounds because it's painful and my mind wants to go somewhere else, so why should I listen to this? So it's a fight. It's always a fight. Therefore Krishna says, Tasmat yutishte, Yisho labasva jitva shatrum bhukshva rajam samidam, mayavate niyatam purvameva, imitrabatram bhavasavachachin. Just give it up and prepare to fight, and after conquering the enemy, you'll enjoy a flourishing kingdom. They're already put to death by my arrangement, and you, O Savasachi, can be but an instrument in the fight. So Krishna wants Arjuna to fight. He doesn't want us to fight. But he wants us to fight with our mind at least. As Prahlad Maharaj said, there's no enemy in this world except for the uncontrolled mind. So at least that much Krishna wants us to do. And then how we fight, we get up and we do service, we chant Hare Krishna, try to hear the philosophy, try to apply it, try to chant with attention and with care and with devotion, calling out to Srimati Radharani and Krishna as their humble servant to kindly engage me in your loving service. That's our fight. Thank you, Khala. Any questions or comments? Yes.
Thank you. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I was thinking how to say it? Like when we get some intelligence, it's coming from the super soul. Is it then perceived by the mind, or how to know what is coming from the mind and what is from the super soul?
Well, whatever's coming from the super soul is generally either common sense, for instance, which is also in the Bhagavad Gita, like don't eat too much, don't sleep too much. So Krishna will help us in that. But also it's in the scriptures too. Krishna tells us, pay attention when we're chanting. We get that intelligence. And we think, well, I don't have time. I have too many other things to think about. That's called Maya. So Krishna will remind us to pay attention, and Maya will say, oh, don't listen to that. That's old-fashioned. We don't do that anymore. No one else does it. Why should you do it? Anything else? Yes. Okay, just that you're near.
Thank you, Maharaj. In regard with duties, what if we, with our limited judgment, think that our immediate superiors or some superiors do something wrong? How much are we responsible by doing or not doing something, in a sense that doing or not doing something can stop our spiritual advancement in that case?
Well, Prahlad Maharaj had a superior, his father, Hiranyakashipu. But he wasn't impeded by him. He went on with his devotional service. And he wasn't offensive to his father, he was very respectful. But still, he maintained his devotional service in spite of whatever his father did to him as a superior. And similarly, he had other superiors. Sandarka, what was their names? Sandarka? His two teachers. They were not very Krishna conscious. They were Vedically conscious, part of the Vedas at least, but he was respectful to them, but he didn't really listen to them. Because if they didn't give him instructions, because he was on the platform of Krishna consciousness, he respected them, but he didn't listen to them. On the other hand, we have the example of Krishna and Sudama. They had the Sandipani Muni, and he asked them to do things which were not comfortable. But Krishna, even God followed instructions of a proper authority.
Hare Krishna. Gurudev, I have one question. How can we advance more in our consciousness? I mean, we are chanting our rounds and doing services, and then what more?
What can we do? During the day, we can try to act in Krishna consciousness, so that when we sit down to chant our rounds, we don't have to remember all the things we didn't do properly during the day. So we act in Krishna consciousness during the day, then when we chant our rounds, then we're already prepared to chant our rounds and go even higher in consciousness. Just like you put the iron in the fire, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter, and then finally it becomes just like fire. But if you put the iron in the fire and then take it out, and put it in ice water, then it cools down. And when you put it back in the fire, it takes longer to heat up again. So we have to try to maintain as much as possible our consciousness and Krishna consciousness during the day, and then when we chant our rounds, our consciousness will even become more Krishna conscious. Anything else? Yes.
It's hard to control the mind. How can we turn it from an enemy to a friend?
Well, the mind can think about Krishna, or it can think about something other than Krishna. It can see things in relationship to Krishna, or it can see things in some other relationship outside of Krishna. It can work for Krishna, or it can work for the senses. So when we see things in relationship to Krishna, we work for Krishna, we have the mood of serving Krishna, then the mind becomes our friend. And when it does anything else, it's not so friendly. Could be our greatest enemy. Kala Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande.